Falcha. Welcome. Another episode of the South Shore Method. I've got part 2 here of Compassionate Detachment today. We're going to talk about how we employ Compassionate Detachment. My last video, I went through what it means, and I'll just do that really quickly again for a 10-second explanation. Is COMD, or Compassionate Detachment, is a strategy that educators and parents can use to shape behavior, like acting out. In a moment a child is screaming or being silly or using threatening language or violence, we use mindfulness, which is a skill of noticing, right, to recognize the function of their behavior, like why the child is why the child is choosing to act this way, right? So I'm going to go through those 4 steps in this short video. And then in the next video, in part 3, we're going to talk about different scenarios and what we can do in those moments, and what the strategies can be for those very specific types of behaviors. So the first one, the first step in compassionate detachment, right, is recognizing the pattern of behavior, right? And recognizing why a child is acting in this way. That's step 1. Why a child is acting in this way. So you got to ask yourself, what does a child hope to accomplish with these behaviors, right? So if a child is, once you ask them to do homework, if they start acting out, then that's kind of an easy one. You go, okay, well, obviously they don't want to do their homework. They want to get out of doing their homework. That's their motivation, right? That's why they've decided to start giving you a hard time or using the language or whatever it is. That's why. They just don't want to do this, right? And a lot of the times it's like, it doesn't, they can tell you, no, it's not that, it's something else, right? But just in compassionate detachment, in parenting, in behaviorism in generally, like, words mean very, very little, right? And we can go through all the ways that, like, talk is cheap, right? It's your actions, right? What you believe is not what you say, is what you do, right? So the child can be telling you, oh, there's a million reasons why, that, like, the teacher didn't tell me, or I don't know, I'm too stupid, I don't know how to do this is dumb, whatever it is, right? All of those are just techniques or distractions to get away from them doing that effortful work. It sucks to do effortful work, right? We as adults know this. Every time that I have, like, a lot of work to do and whatever, all of a sudden, like, I'll start cleaning my house, I'll start organizing my files, right? Those behaviors are actually, you could call them positive or whatever, but actually they're procrastination behaviors, right? And I just don't want to do this work. I can make a million excuses, and actually a lot of people, and unfortunately, I find myself in this category a lot, right? You'll find, and if we start paying attention to our behavior, a lot of the times when we are stressed or under a lot of pressure, we'll find ourselves getting into arguments with other people because it's a nice procrastination technique from doing what you have to do. I mean, it sounds like, oh, that's counterintuitive. Like, why would I make things more difficult for myself when I have something to do? I don't know. It's a learned behavior. It's part of patterns, and it's a very common behavior pattern. So step 1, right, again, is when your child is doing this stuff, you got to ask yourself, is this just to get out of doing the work, or to just get out of doing anything effortful? The answer is usually yes, right? And once you have that, then we move on to, once you understand, you figure that part out, we move on to step 2, which is removing, like, yourself, in quotations, from the interaction, right? So this means that, like, you need to detach whatever moment that emotion that is in that moment, right? Whether it be, like, shame or pity, or you feel disrespected, or all these other stuff. It's like, you got to let that go, because that's not helping. That's not serving you as a parent. That's not helping you achieve your goals. What your goal is, right? We talked about this last time, is to create the most whole person you can as a teenager and as an adult, or whatever down the line that is, or even, like, if you're dealing with a toddler, just as a grade school age kid. We're always thinking about that future, right? So we're being compassionate towards our future selves and our children's future selves. The moment right now, we're letting them get out of the work or not holding them to account, right? And then they're giving into that emotion of like, oh man, I feel bad. I feel like I'm putting this on the kid. I feel like there's so much stress. They don't need this right now. You know what, honey? Just don't do your work. Go take a break. I think this is too tough. You know, we're all guilty of that. I'd be guilty of that myself. But every time we do that, we're failing our child. Every single time. Because what we're doing is we're teaching them that you can pull the ripcord, you can bail out of anything that you don't like. And we know later on in life, if you don't develop that behavior, it becomes a lot easier not to fall into it. So if there's a job, you don't quit your job or you don't do the things right, those people who can follow through are going to be more successful. Those people who can persevere and go through that, even though it might be BS and it might be, a stupid mindless task at work, but I got to do it just because like I know that like one, I don't want my boss on me. I'll feel better if it's done. Blah blah blah. Right. So step one, recognize why a child's acting this way. Step two, remove yourself from the interaction, right? So remove your own personal feelings and emotions. Detect and detach the moment you're feeling from the task you're trying to achieve, which is to get the kid to do the homework, which serves the overall goal of teaching them to be more responsible and persevere through stuff that they don't want to do. So number three is remember, or like being mindful, right, of our overarching goal. Our overarching goal, we talked about it a lot in the last podcast, and right here again, is that we're trying to create the most whole individual person that we can, that has the ability to cope, that is strong in all the ways that we want them strong, right? Um, so removing yourself and being mindful of that goal, those are steps 2 and 3. They're also kind of like the same thing. All of these are molded into one thing called compassionate detachment, right? Step 4, right, is actually employing that compassionate detachment. So redirect the child back towards the task. Remove yourself emotionally from whatever the interaction is, because as soon as, and this is I think the most important part of compassionate detachment, is that if you give your child something emotionally to push against, right, they're going to keep pushing. I mean, you'll see this in interactions with adults and colleagues and whatever else, right? If you manage people rather than create an adversary for them, you can get a lot further, right? You catch more flies with honey. I mean, it's true. And it's like you have to be strategic with your child and to not emotionally react in that moment, because then they're going to push back, especially if they're also emotionally reactive in that way. And almost all parents and children are emotionally reactive to each other because we care so deeply about their feelings. And so, and not only that, but we're so close and invested to each other that like that intimacy, right, allows us to kind of let go of that control that we would normally have in school or at work, right? So a lot of kids have a lot of behavior issues at home, but not at school. Well, that's because at school they've been asked to maintain that behavior. So that's what we're going to try to start doing at home, is that we do have to be a little stoic. We have to be above that. So step 1, recognize why a child is acting the way that they are, right? What are their motivations? Remove yourself and your emotions from the interaction. Be mindful of your overarching goal, which is to, have a healthy, happy family and healthy, happy child. Healthy, happy child that becomes a teenager or adult, or an independent teenager or adult. That's what we want, right? We want people to be able to take care of themselves, because we're not always going to be here as parents. And that's our job. That is our number one job, is to make sure that our children can take care of themselves. So we got to be mindful of that. And then we employ that. We show the compassion towards their future selves, right? So when they thank us when they're in their 30s, being like, wow, I don't think I ever would have got through whatever this was if you hadn't stuck to your guns and made me do it. And it really taught me something. Where, they're never going to be like, oh, thanks for letting me get out of that homework that one time. It really mattered. No one's going to remember that in 30 years, but they are going to remember how you were consistent with them and how you helped them become a whole person. And so that's your challenge. And if you're not doing that as a parent, you're failing your child when you're not being consistent, when you're not sticking to your guns, when you're not following through, whether it's discipline or following through on things that you promised the kid. And let's say if you do this, we'll go to Disney World, and you don't go to Disney World. That kid learns that you're full of it, right? And like this goes, so if you don't compassionately detach and your emotions stay high, you can lose that advantage with your kid. You can lose. They're gonna learn that your word means almost nothing. That's the same. So it's like if parents, when emotions get high, they're like, oh, I'm gonna call the police, or or like, they'll send you away. Well, you can say those things, right? But when the child sees that nobody calls the cops and no one takes them away, then they learn that, like, you don't really have any authority. You are just words. So that's where compassionate detachment allows you to follow through. Don't rely on those words because they are meaningless in behavior. You cannot rationalize with a child. Like, I know people think that they can, but the fact is it's just about the behavioral consequences. Actually, what's at the end of this? Are there consequences and contingencies? If there aren't, you can't get your kid to do what they want. All right. So stay tuned. Part 3, I'm going to walk through some scenarios. All right, guys. Toodaloo.